Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Gregory Wilpert, coming to you from Quito, Ecuador. Shimon Peres died at the age of 93 on Wednesday. He was the leader of Israel's Labor Party and a former president and former prime minister of Israel. Also, he was one of the last surviving members of the founding generation of Israel. He's generally remembered as a peacemaker who was one of the recipients of the 1993 Nobel Peace Prize for his negotiations that led to the Oslo Accords with the Palestinians. Heads of state from around the world, including President Obama and former President Bill Clinton, attended the funeral services. Joining us to talk about Shimon Peres' life and legacy is Michel Warschawski. Michel is a journalist and writer and a founder of the Alternative Information Center in Israel. His books include On the Border and Towards an Open Tomb, on the crisis of Israeli society. Thanks for being on the Real News, Michel.
Good evening.
So, as I mentioned in the introduction, for Israelis and the general public in the US and other Western countries, Shimon Peres is perhaps best known as being the dove and peacemaker of Israeli politics. Tell us a little bit about how he came to acquire this reputation.
He acquired this reputation very late. In fact, Shimon Peres was, first of all, the man who built the Israeli military power. He was already sent in 1948 by Ben-Gurion to buy arms for the new Israeli state. He was in charge with the relations with France at the time of the French-Israeli love story. And according to foreign sources, he's the one who through the French connection, established the nuclear industry and the nuclear armament that we are not supposed to admit that it exists, but according to foreign sources, it exists. So Peres is the one who built the Israeli military power. And this is what will remain from his story. It is true that he was the man behind Peres and what we call at that time the Peres boys, like Yossi Beilin, were the architects of the Oslo process, the recognition of the PLO, and the opening of the negotiations which were supposed to bring to reconciliation between Israeli and Palestinians through two states. But Shimon Peres was also the man who destroyed what he built with his own hands, meaning the Oslo process.
Well, I want to turn to the Oslo process in a moment, but so you're saying that basically for his participation in this negotiations, he was one of the main reasons he got this reputation relatively late in life. For being the peacemaker. Tell us a little bit more about that, and then I want to turn into kind of the perspective of the Palestinians on his life. But first, what did he do concretely was this reputation that he was the peacemaker and the dove? I mean, how did that happen in Israeli politics?
Shimon Peres understood that the Palestinians were a fact, that the Palestinian existence as a people on this land was a fact that cannot be ignored or denied anymore. He understood it much before many other Israeli leaders, and that we should try to achieve with the Palestinians based on two states, not necessarily on the basis of equality, in fact on the basis of inequality, but to, in order to do it, to recognize the PLO. And what Peres did through Yossi Beilin and the other Peres boys was secret negotiation with the PLO, with the promise that they will be able, the leadership of the PLO and Yasser Arafat will be able to come back to Palestine, and after negotiation to be at the head of an independent Palestinian state. This was the Oslo Declaration of Principle. This is what he negotiated, and this is what he succeeded to convince Yitzhak Rabin, who was a prime minister at that time, to accept. I think the main achievement of really to convince Yitzhak Rabin was someone quite tough, very slow to understand new realities, but unlike Shimon Peres, when he understood it and when he gave his word, he was sticking on it.
You mentioned that later in his life he was participating in the undoing of those accords. In what way? Explain that a little bit more.
Oh, very simply, when Yitzhak Rabin was assassinated because he was implementing the Oslo Declaration of Principle and because he was going a way which meant withdraw from the West Bank and Gaza and dismantling of the settlements, Shimon Peres had the possibility as interim prime minister to continue the road of Yitzhak Rabin and to use a real disarray which existed among the right wing, which was behind the assassination of Rabin, but was quite shocked by its own deed and didn't believe that it will bring to the assassination of a prime minister. Instead of doing that, Shimon Peres, 2 days after the funeral of Yitzhak Rabin, announced now it's not time to renew the negotiation, it is time for national reconciliation. National reconciliation was a slogan for a whole year, pushed by Shimon Peres, explaining to the Palestinians that he is sorry, but now he, as a responsible leader of Israel, he has other priorities, and giving to the right wing in Israel, at the moment, this right wing was under shock and under disarray, giving it, in fact, the power of veto. If we need national reconciliation, then it means that nothing can be done which will not have the okay of the right wing and the settlers, meaning providing them a kind of veto on any step further in the peace process. This was the end of the peace process launched by Yitzhak Rabin.
So, I mean, it seems like he might have gone back and forth. That is in his positions. That is in the beginning, as you mentioned, he was part of the building up the military of Israel and also part of the nuclear program. And my understanding is that even before that, he was part of the before Israel was even founded. He was part of the groups that were fighting the Palestinians at that time. And then later on, he also became somebody who supported the West Bank and Gaza settlements. And so is it correct to say then that he kind of had this period of being relatively militant and then goes back during the peace process trying to find a solution and then returns to his original positions?
I don't want to make cheap psychology, but if you read the newspapers of the last couple of days around Shimon Peres, one thing is very clear. Shimon Peres wanted more than anything to be loved by the Israeli public. And in fact, all his political career was trying to achieve the unachievable, being loved. He was exactly the contrary of what the Israelis like. He was not Yitzhak Rabin, he was not Yigal Allon, the fighters, the blonde fighters of 1948, the one who grew in a kibbutz. He was from a bourgeois, urban family. He had a strong Polish accent. He was never part of the family, and all his life he tried to be accepted as part of the family and to be loved by the Israeli public. I think he achieved it a few years ago when he was already nothing politically speaking, and the president of the state, which means without any political possibility, with any possibility to take decisions.
Of course, among the Palestinians, he was often perceived more as a wolf in sheep's clothing, and partly because he was blamed also for the attacks on, or at least held co-responsible for the attacks on the Palestinian camps in Lebanon, in Sabra and Shatila in '83, and then the Kana attack in '96. Can you just tell us briefly a little bit about that background and what happened there and his role in those incidents, in those attacks?
Yeah, he was a wolf among the wolf, and he was never a sheep, but he was someone with, I would say, a better understanding of the international context than most of the Israeli politicians, and especially Europe. And he, not out of humanism or support for human rights and the national rights of the Palestinians, simply out of a reading of the international map, he initiated the process of Oslo and tried to reach what he saw to be the best possible compromise that should be achieved now, because tomorrow the compromise will be worse from Israeli standards.
Okay, well, thanks so much, Michel, for giving us this a brief overview of the life of Shimon Peres, and of course, the story of Israel is far from over, and we'll be coming back to you again. Thanks again for joining us.
Have a nice day.
And thank you for watching the Real News Network.